creative company is so delicious, and the creative process is one of my favorite subjects. How humans can create something out of nothing is wildly exciting to me. And one of the best ways I love to spend my time is writing and recording my songs. Alain Mallet has worked with so many fabulous people. He's an amazing piano player, keyboard player, arranger, producer. He's worked with Jonathan Brooke, Mili Bermejo, Jamie Haddad, Paul Simon. He's got so many cool stories. We've got a real nice version on YouTube. What is it like to be on tour? What is it like to be in the recording studio? How do you make that leap from I play with my friends to I'm playing with amazing top-of-the-line musicians in the world? The music and the playing is exactly the same. How you frame it in your mind is everything. Alain.
Hey.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm pretty excellent. How are you? Thank you so much for hopping on.
Sure, no problem.
Well, I've always wanted to talk to you because you're just so cool and you've done so many cool things. And
Okay.
I've emailed you many times over the years to pick your brain or to hang with you a little bit. So I really appreciate you doing this.
You're welcome. It's not, if I didn't respond, believe me, it's not intentional. It's just, I don't take myself too seriously sometimes.
Well,
but
I remember reading that you had attended Berklee. What year was that you went there?
83.
Really?
I can say this now because it's actually not a secret, but I graduated in 2010. Because like a lot of my peers, well, first of all, I was, it was very expensive for my parents to pay for Berklee, which by today's standards, of course, is ridiculous because I know. Came back from France. I just sold my family home, and I found the bills from Berklee, and I was doing a diploma. So at the time, it was like $1,600 a semester or something like that.
Right.
So it was, but still, it was a lot of money for my parents.
In today's dollars, it would be a lot more.
Yeah, of course. So I stayed as long as I could.
In 83.
Yeah. I mean, I stayed a long time, but back then you could also, as a foreigner, you could take part-time very early. So I did that to lessen the bills. And then I left to go on the road. And I had like something like 16 credits left.
Mm.
And then I started teaching. When I moved back from New York, I started teaching in 2003 at Berklee. And when my dad's health started declining, I realized that they had an empty folder at home. That was the folder from my graduation because I did walk, but I didn't finish. So there was no diploma in it. So I reached out to my chairs, with the chairs of my major, and they were like, all right, let's see. And it turns out that I was actually teaching the classes that I hadn't taken. And then I had some piano proficiencies to finish. I was also teaching the piano department, and thankfully, Stephanie Tiernan, who was Stephanie
Pliszek.
Well, but Pliszek at the time, but
yes.
Had stayed my teacher throughout the years. I kept coming back to take lessons with her even when I was living in New York.
Oh, wow.
So she gave me credit by exam, basically.
Nice.
So I did graduate in 2010. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Good for you. Yes. Yeah. I remember coming up from New Jersey and being a new student in 1978, and I graduated in 82. And the psychology department did the same thing. When they saw all the high-level classes I had taken in high school, they just gave me the credits.
Oh, wow.
helped me get through a few academics that way. But who were you
So you graduated right before I arrived, basically.
Yes. Okay. And I started teaching in 1984.
Oh my God, you've been there 40
a million. Yeah.
Oh wow. Hey, I mean, listen, I'm not knocking it, by the way, because this is a conversation that I have often with friends and foes. I love Berkeley. I still love Berkeley.
Right, me too.
I love what it stands for, and I am convinced that if it hadn't been for Berkeley, I wouldn't be a musician today. I mean, if I hadn't come to the States, I wouldn't be a musician today. Really? What would you have done? I don't know. Probably died early, or I hope not. I don't know what else. I just I connected with the American mentality of going about making music. It just made sense to me. And Berkeley, I mean, if you look at my career being kind of a jack of all trades, Berkeley was a perfect environment for that. And it still is. I mean, there's no other school where you can go and, study with top-notch teachers on your instrument and still like take classes in all sorts of other things and be surrounded by people that are going to be great arrangers, great engineers, great, everything. Yeah. And for a second, it was confusing when I first came because, I came from France, you cross the ocean, you want to, I was an average player. There were people here like, Dave Kikowski and I don't know, Christian Jacobs, like some of my peers, students. I was the worst of the bunch, and I was really depressed. But then once I was informed that maybe I could get to work and and get better, I did get to work, and but for a minute, I was so obsessed with becoming the best jazz pianist that I could be that anybody who was not a jazz musician, I was not particularly interested in. Right. And it wasn't until like a couple of years later when I started realizing that I had interests in many other things, and that being at Berkeley, I was going to get an opportunity to do all those things. I started paying attention to all these people who were not beboppers and whatever, and realized that they were all turning up in all sorts of capacities all over the world, as well, you name it, basically. So I loved Berkeley then for that, and I still do. I think there's a lot of fine schools out there, but if you're somebody who has a mind for a lot of different areas of the music world, then I think it's an amazing place to be. Yes. Who did you go on the road with that you didn't finish Berkeley right away? Who was it at the time? Oh, it was The Story. Oh, really? Wow. Yeah. Yeah, because I stayed there a long time, and it was I split in. Like I said, you could take part-time very early on, so I stretched it out. Yeah, because I was really busy playing. The whole thing was just a surprise to me because there was this myth when I left France. People talked, and they still talk a lot about. Talk a lot of bullshit about America. The same way Americans talk a lot of bullshit about France. Basically, nobody knows what's going on anywhere. But in France, one of the myths was that at every gig, and this is going to sound like a weird thing to say, but this is true. Every gig, there were representatives of immigration and the union. And if you were a foreigner, you would get sent back home right away. And I'm not exaggerating. That was the myth. That was the idea.
Yeah.
And apparently,
Keep you from doing it. It was fear.
Yeah. So I came here. I didn't have a suit. I didn't have a keyboard. I figured I would stay for one semester, 1 year, and that would be it, because I needed to work. And lo and behold, I mean, I still remember my first gig, and I started gigging probably my second month at Berkeley. Not big gigs, mind you, but little pickup gigs and stuff like that. And I realized that, the only thing that's going to be a determining factor is how many tunes I know and how punctual I am, or something like that. So,
yeah.
So basically, that was it, and that was. So I started working, and I was, eking a living, and so I started taking part time as soon as I could, so that my parents wouldn't have to, lose their house just to put me through music school. Wow. And so I dropped. I went on the road. I think it was '89 when we started touring with the story, and thought maybe I would come back and finish, but then life had other plans for me.
How did you meet the story?
Jonathan was so it was those two singers, Jonathan Brooke and
Jennifer Kimball. Yeah.
And Jonathan had attended a summer semester, and she was hanging out around Berkeley. And I met her, and I mean, I had a crush on her. I didn't know what she did, but she was cute, and we started dating, and she played me a live tape of the group, of the duo. And they, like I said, I was a real jazz head, but there was this one tune. She put this E. Cummings,
yes.
She or they, I don't know how much, I know I've worked closely with Jonathan. I don't know how much, Jennifer was involved in the, in the whole process. She had some involvement, but that particular tune, I don't know. But the bottom line is, it was this E. Cummings poem called "Love Is More Thicker Than Forget."
Right.
And Jonathan was playing piano, and it is this totally wild harmony. And I thought, well, that is really dope. So I decided that, and then I realized that, well, then we got married in '88, I think, and it was '88. And the request for these live tapes was just touring it.
Nice.
So I thought, we got to do a proper demo. So we went to the studio. I had no studio experience except like going in, playing jazz, and we did a little demo of just the two of them and the guitar, and then we demoed that song as well on the piano. And it was a long time ago, so I'm trying to recall. But I think the demo was called "Over Oceans." And it found its way to a little label called Green Linnet.
I remember that, yeah.
And they signed a little folk label out of Connecticut, I believe. And they signed the group. And we didn't want to do a folk record. So I had this friend, an amazing drummer and producer named Ben Whitman. who was playing with a lot of local bands, and he played me a demo of one of his songs. He actually had this friend of ours, Olga Roman, who's a singer from Spain. She's the chair of the Valencia program at Berkeley in Spain. And he had done this song with her singing, and it sounded like Peter Gabriel meets, I don't know, it was so dope. And I said, Ben, come and check out the story. So he came to see a live gig, and he loved it. So we decided to do a demo.
Nice.
I just piggybacked, on his skills, because he was like so, he had so much experience. He knew stuff that I had no idea what was going on. And so I remember how it went down. We didn't want to make a folk record, so we told Greenland that we had this idea for doing a record with the music that was a little more maybe involved production-wise. And I recall that we went in the studio with Ben, Mike Rivard, who's still here locally, a great bass player who has this band called Club Delft. That's his pride project and love project. And Kevin Barry, so teaching at Berkeley, played guitar. And I just recall that we went in the studio and we did this one song called Grace and Gravity. And that became the name of the record. But the problem was that we took every bit of money that we had at the time. I mean, we were broke.
Yeah.
We didn't have a car. It was $2,000. And we went in the studio and we recorded that one song with all the production values that we had, et cetera, et cetera. And again, remember at the time it was tape, locking, whatever we had, like, tape,
224 tracks?
Yeah, no, not even that. Are you kidding? This was like a 16, and
16?
It wasn't even 2-inch. It was like a 1-inch machine. I forget what the studio was.
That's what this is, a 1-inch 16.
But the so we did that one tune, and the label, they were used to doing folky kind of records, and I know it was a little bit over their head, but they were like, well, yeah, that's interesting, but let's hear some other things. And we were flat broke, so that was a problem. So I remember we went back in the studio with just Ben and I, and we had done stuff on a 4-track and
cassette deck.
Yeah, and we went to a studio. Do you remember that studio that's in the alley next to Haviland? Where I forget where it was, and Scott Gilman was working there, and Andrew Murdoch was the engineer.
Okay,
it was a little hole in the wall.
Yes.
There were a bunch of rehearsal rooms and studios there. Yeah. And so we went back in there. And I remember, like, Ben recorded live cymbals. That was the only, besides the vocals, it was the only live stuff that was, and the acoustic guitar. And everything else was programmed. The keyboards were programmed. The drums were programmed.
Right.
And so we sent another like 3 or 4 tunes to the label. And so they signed us, and then it went very fast. They signed us. The record came out. We went on the road. That's when I left Berkeley. And then Jonathan was just giving away the CDs left and right to anybody who was interested. And somehow the CD fell in the hand of, to this day, one of my greatest heroes, Tommy Lipuma.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the day he called us at home, and Jonathan didn't know who he was because he was more of a jazz guy, like
Sure. Yeah.
Lou Evans and Natalie Cole and all that, Benson,
Yeah.
And she's looking at me and she's going like, Tommy Lee Puma? What? So I said, yeah, talk to him. So he was the head A&R at Elektra.
Yes.
And that's how it happened. They signed us to Elektra. They bought the contract from Green Linnet.
Right.
Deal from Green Linnet. Because and I remember it was my first really painful dealings with the record industry. I was never a big fan. I mean, there's a reason why I have nothing to do with it these days. But I remember sitting down at the negotiation table when Green Linnet was basically trying to pretend that they were gonna, they needed to be paid a gazillion dollars because they were gonna, we were basically, Elektra was taking away their cash cow.
Oh my goodness.
And that was ridiculous. I mean, they would never have been able to do anything with the group.
No.
So they would, but it happened, and then and that was it, and then the rest is whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic because I had the Green Linnet release and Grace and Gravity. And then, of course, I have so many of Jonathan's solo albums as well, and a couple of Jennifer's. But I loved the sound, I loved the arrangements, and I loved the merging of the styles. Like, I didn't realize till I heard Jeff Lynne say it on a BBC special that he loved pop rock because it was all the styles. So many people have said to me over the years, like, well, what style is your music? And I used to say pop rock or art rock, but they were looking for, I want to do jazz, I want to do a Latin beat, I want to do a specific thing, a rumba, I want to do whatever, swing, whatever to your song, and it doesn't fit. It's like, you've got to do something that fits the song. And harmonically, because I grew up listening to Chicago and the Beatles and Stevie Wonder and Carly Simon and folks that just had such a beautiful sense of all the chords. Anything goes, especially all the standards and the great guitar players that influenced me at the time. So your work really stood out to me because it was like you're juggling those two worlds. The world that helped Joni Mitchell become more mainstream, but understood the richness of her vocabulary and what she was doing harmonically, that she needed jazz players to interpret those chords, especially in alternate tunings that she played and wrote in. And then Jonathan was doing the same. There's much richer harmony going on. And so how did you then start arranging and producing from that, just being at those sessions and knowing what the song needed?
Okay, so you need to know that now in retrospect, and I suppose it's probably the same for a lot of people, but
the story has changed.
Well, I mean, it's not in retrospect. First of all, the first record, Grace Gravity, was that was so much band. I remember the first time he decided to do more than 3 takes of vocals. I was like, I think I stormed out of the studio. I thought it was stupid. Now I can do 30 takes of vocals and remember the bits that I liked from each take, but I didn't have those kind of chops at the time. And I remember, Jennifer sang great, Jonathan sang great, that what the hell is wrong with what we just did? And he was just looking for something else. And he was the first guy that I saw really kind of dig in and look for. And we butted head on a lot of things too, like musically speaking.
Sure.
I was a keyboard player, so I wanted to put keyboards everywhere. And, so in retrospect, what we had in well, I'm not going to speak for Ben. I think he was a lot more mature than I was at the time, musically speaking. But for me, it was like, I was, I had skills. Let's put it this way: how much or how little is not for me to decide. But I had skills, and I was dead set on using them. So when I listen back to those records, what I'm hearing is me flexing my musical muscles like as much as I possibly can.
Does it fit? Does it fit?
No, but I mean, it's important to say, because, now I have to share my experience with young musicians, and I don't want them to think that ignorance is bliss. And we were ignorant, man. I didn't know. I mean, if I heard the backbeat, then that's it. It was a rock tune. Or if I heard like a slight syncopation, it was a funk tune. And so that's why like those records are all over the place, musically speaking, because we went all the way, well, as far as we could, in every direction that the music suggested to us. I don't produce like this anymore, thank God, because, as much as I recognize people's right to have a fondness for those records, I don't find them particularly compelling, personally, musically speaking. I think the singing is still great, and some of the songs hold up. But as far as my work is concerned, it gives me a rash every time I listen to it.
You mean 10 Cent Wings and Plum?
No. That's when. So that was different, because when Jonathan went solo, that's also when Ben decided to leave the group.
Right.
And so it was the first time that I found myself at the helm again, for better or worse. And we did this record, Plum, and I was starting to sense already that I needed to do things differently. Plus, I didn't want to try to replace Ben, because Ben Whitman was such a great musician in his own right, and his touch is all over those first two records, the Grace Gravity and Angel in the House. Mm-hmm. So I knew that if I had any chance at making a successful record on my own, I shouldn't try to recreate whatever it was that we did together.
Right.
I made a very different record. There are so many funny stories surrounding this record, but Plum, that was the name of the record, Jonathan's first solo record. That was recorded live. We were all in one room. The guitar amps were upstairs on the gazebo. The bass, forget if we amped the bass. I think we might have, but it might have been direct. And then Abe Laboyel was playing drums, and there was an acoustic piano, and I had some keyboard parts, but mostly I was playing acoustic and some other instruments. I forget if I played those live or I was overdone. It's kind of fuzzy. But I remember that Abe had an 18-inch hi-hat. Abe is a huge guy.
Yeah.
Just like he's tall and huge. He's a big guy, And so his drums are like, they take up a lot of room, even though he doesn't have a lot of toms. Or, it's just like, he looks like he's in slow motion whenever he's playing drums. I mean,
yes,
if anybody's seen him with Paul McCartney, it's just like, it's ridiculous, So
and I knew of him when he was at Berkeley, when he was a student.
I knew him when he was at Berkeley. And when I called him actually to play drums with us, he was playing with Seal. And I thought, oh, I remembered him from Berkeley, and and Ben was a great drummer. So I thought, I love drummers. I got to have a great drummer. And I remember Abe, but then I'm looking for his number, and I find out that he's playing with Seal. Like, well, that's a long shot. And but we sent him the music, and he had just quit Seal, and he, lo and behold, he ended up spending 2 or 3 years with us. I mean, it was actually, I think he really liked some of the music. Certainly he had other opportunities.
It's great stuff. I've even tried to get in touch with Jonathan to do one of these, because I've always loved her work, and it'd be great to get into the songwriting. Getting into the songwriting process would be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, that's how Plum ended up being what it is, because it's a very live record. Everything was kind of improvised on the fly, because Abe is also like a very, like the process was different. Ben and I used to work out all the arrangements in advance. So we walked into the studio everything was fully fleshed out. Again, to a fault, because I used to be so paranoid about stuff not sounding like the demos that, I mean, Duke Levine, who plays on those records, and Mike, my God, how we stayed friends, I'm not even sure.
It's hard.
I mean, on the first record, I made them play note for note.
Yeah.
The stuff that I had programmed. I was such an asshole. It's unbelievable.
I have been that person.
I was so paranoid. I thought basically, and people think it's arrogance. It's not that, it's fear. I was afraid of anything that I didn't understand or that I didn't know. I didn't realize what great musicians they were until I had the chance to work with them a little more. And so to me, they were just like people who were going to do my little parts. And,
yeah.
But anyway, so fast forward. So we're doing this record, and it was funny because anything that had piano, I mean, basically there was hi-hat in every drum, but there was hi-hat in the piano mics. There was like,
Oh, sure.
And I remember that Elliot Shiner, who a dear friend and to this day, I mean, he's mixed my own records, et cetera, et cetera. He had mixed The Angel in the House. And so, of course, he was tapped for mixing Plum. And we were in the studio, and he would put up those tracks, and he'd be like, what am I supposed to do with this? There's like drums in everything. But he heard the demos and the roughs, and the roughs sounded okay. And Ben Wish was the engineer who tracked it. Ben Wish did Mark Cohen and people like that,
Yeah.
And Ben was a great engineer and producer in his own right, but he had a particular vision for the sound. Yeah. And so he's principally the reason why this record sounds the way it does. And so we kept sending, I remember we were downtown, and I would go uptown to in New York City to give Tommy the mixes, and he kept rejecting them. And after the third one, I remember Ben came to visit while we were mixing because he wanted to hang out with Elliot. And I walk in, and this is the third mix that Tommy is not happy with.
Oh.
And
what did he like?
What didn't he like? It would be as if somebody was, I mean, I'm a decent pianist. I can do a fair amount of things. But if you put me on a Dixieland gig, I don't know what to do. Those are the same chords, there's the same 12 notes. I just don't understand what's going on. I mean, I understand. I just don't have a sense of what I'm supposed to do. And I think Elliot, to his credit, one of the most graceful engineer that I know, kept struggling to make it sound like him. Because the raw material didn't make sense to him. but it made sense to Ben. So to Ben Witch. So when I came in after playing that mix for Tommy the second time, the third mix rather, I walk back into the studio, and Elliot is looking at me and goes, he hates it. I mean, I'm a pup. This is the third record that I'm involved with. They just gave me a shitload of money to make a record. I'm on my own. I'm responsible for all these great musicians, all this great music,
and these engineers, and trying to calm everybody's concerns.
Right, and Elliot is a god, and
yes.
And how am I supposed to look at him and go, yeah, your mixes are shit? That's it's not. Because that wasn't the case even, but Tommy could reject it. I would never have done that. To me, they were perfect, So
I would love to hear those in comparison to the album.
I might have some that somewhere actually. That's interesting. I forget. But then he turns to Ben Wish, who was standing there, and Elliot goes, Ben, you should mix this record. And Ben's like, no, yes. He's like, no, you should mix this record, because Tommy heard the roughs and he liked them. And he was right, because the first Angel in the House, when we sent the roughs, he hated the roughs because the tracking engineer did the roughs, and he didn't like them. And so the fact that he liked the rough was actually really telling. And
so two different people.
Yeah, exactly.
Tommy liked the roughs, but
that Ben Wish did for Plum,
and someone else didn't.
No, the Angel in the House was a different engineer who shall remain nameless, because I don't want to embarrass him about this Ruffs story. He's a great engineer, but that's besides the point. So Ben ended up mixing the record, and it's to me it was a great learning experience, because I realized that you got to do what you know. Music or anything else, you got to talk about what you know. And Elliot, it's not like he didn't like the music, but he didn't know what to make of those sounds. But those sounds made sense to Ben, because he tracked it with a particular aesthetic in mind, and that was it. So we remixed the record. I mean, we restarted with Ben Wish.
Did it again.
And it was, it sold dozens of copies.
Yes, it did. No, to me, when I was a kid, I felt like arranging and producing were pretty separate things, except that I loved that George Martin was such a great arranger, and I felt like that made him such a fantastic producer. Now the terms get broader and broader, and some of these producers are not only watching the budget, but they're doing the arrangements, they're playing half the instruments, maybe they're even co-writing. It's getting crazy as far as what is responsible for each label and what they actually do. How do you consider yourself, and do you have any separate definitions of what you think those are for you?
Being a musician, I thought was an asset back then.
You don't think it is now?
No, not so much. No, really, I mean it. Being musical and being a musician are two different things. No, I'm dead serious, because I know great producers who can't tell a minor chord from a plate of pasta. I mean, there are very famous stories about people asking, horn players to, if they can't play it up the octave, playing it half an octave or something like that.
Things that don't make sense to the instrument.
Very funny stories like that. And these aren't necessarily bad producers. As a matter of fact, some of these guys are amazing producers.
Well, like Rick Rubin, right?
Rubin, Which
Rick
Rick
Rubin's
Rubin, you mean?
not a player, not a writer, but
Is he not? I didn't know that.
he just knows how things feel and what kind of things he likes, and he can bring out the best in people.
Yeah, probably. I mean, in Nashville, a lot of these producers just open the door, make sure the musicians are there, and split. Because they're doing record copies, they're redoing the demos. The demos are really involved,
right?
And made by great musicians, and then they get the top-notch musicians, and basically they leave it up to the engineer to capture, with the top musicians what was on the demos. So there's nothing for them to do, basically. Maybe they get involved with the vocals.
So they're just watching the budget.
Well, I don't want to speculate as to what it is that they do, because I've also learned to speak more from my own experience than trying to, understand what the other people do. I have some former students who are now starting to be successful as producers, and I have no idea what they're doing. I really don't. And they've tried to explain it to me. I don't know how they're monetizing their work. I have no idea.
You mean with the beats and just making a groove?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was, like my generation is we get points on records, and you sell records, and if you go past your recording budget or marketing budget, then you start making getting a percentage of the records, and that's how you made,
sure.
That's how you made your money. But what I meant earlier is that being a musician had the unfortunate consequence of putting my musicianship ahead of actually the work that I was doing. And that's a mistake that I would not necessarily make again.
But yet they're hiring you because of your musicianship.
I think they're hiring me because I get results.
Sure.
And those they're not exactly sure how those results come about.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Because let's face it, after first of all, whatever little reputation I got, whatever little, vibe I got because of some very specific records. Jonathan and Jennifer were part of a movement. The AAA movement was born with them, with Sean Colvin, with Patty Larkin, with what's her name? Leaving Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, Sheryl Crow.
Sheryl Crow. These people. AAA was, I don't know what it means now, actually. I don't know if it means to say, but at the time it meant...
Adult alternative acoustic or something like that.
Yeah, at the time it was adult acoustic alternative. That's what maybe it means the same thing.
I was in that category too, and so was my friend Sarah Burrell. We were marketing her record there.
So it was an answer to all the other music that was available, and that was, and by the way, this might be of interest to some of your listeners. You'll notice that all the artists that I mentioned were women, and most young women who are doing their thing nowadays can't even imagine what it was like to be a woman in that business back then. I mean, we had to listen to guys tell us, we can't put you in the rotation because we're already playing a woman today.
That's what I heard all the time. Yeah, we've already added a woman to the playlist. Yeah,
we already have a woman in the playlist. I mean, in my opinion, the one who changed everything was Alanis. She just wrote the rules for everybody, and she just made it possible single-handedly for all these women to, And I'm not saying that, like Bonnie Raitt before her and Tina were, I'm not saying that they weren't great women artists, but, Alanis just
broke
the
the mold.
freaking ceiling right up, it was incredible. All of a sudden.
How? Do you remember?
Was that?
If you're giving her credit for that, what would you say was the thing that did that for her? How did she do that?
She was amazing. She was amazing, and I mean, Jagged Little Pill was just, it was edgy but pop and rocking at the same time. It had everything that was necessary to to basically open the doors for a lot of other women. And again, I mean, by then Cheryl was already popular, and there were other artists that were popular, but they were still dealing with the same shit, And then here comes Alanis, and then she's spending, months and months at the top with several singles, singles up the wazoo. And then all of a sudden, like, radio stations are like, "Oh, we can make money with chicks. Yeah, sure. Let's put them on the road." No, I mean, listen, I'm using this type of vocabulary, purposefully, because
that's what you were told. Sure.
That's literally what
they said.
What we would be told. So I think that
But getting back to you as an arranger and a producer.
Yeah, so I digress. So as an arranger, what it means is that people that are not musicians are not tempted to put themselves above the music, above the song.
Okay.
And I think back then, I wanted to be as important a part of the process as the songs themselves. I don't think it was. Yeah, it was arrogance. And then the thing that changes that for most people, at least it did for me, is that you tap out. So what I'm saying is that, I got a little vibe because of those pseudo jazzy, folky records, pop rock records that I was making. So then I'm getting all these requests to produce stuff that are essentially the same music. So I find myself drying out after a while because I wasn't
being a musician.
Well, I was doing everything.
Oh.
I was getting all these artists that were, basically singer with his or her guitar. And then everything else I have to imagine. So I'm making the beats, I'm making the, and
you have to be the whole band, yeah.
People who know me know that me making a beat is not, I don't do trap. It's not like it's not a clap on 2 and 4 and like an 808. It's, every song has to be like, I'm reinventing the wheel. I still to this day don't have any libraries of sound. Every time I start, I spend hours just looking for inspiration.
Yeah.
So after a while, I started realizing that, oh man, that's starting to sound a lot like something I've already done, probably. And I mean, at this point, the thing I would love to do the most would be to produce a group.
Yes.
Give me U2, give me, Radiohead, like people, like,
yeah,
artists where everybody has like something to contribute and where I don't have to, tap into my limited, bag of tricks to yet one again recreate something that somebody like 30 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah. So then what would you do as a producer, since you wouldn't be doing half of the finding the parts or the sounds?
Listen more. Let the song, produce itself.
But still, there's the interpretation of taking that live sound in the room and making it translate well onto the recorded medium.
I'm not saying that I would just like sit and
I know, but that's what I'm asking.
The couch and sip some single malt or something like that. I mean, I would still do some shit, but
yeah.
No, I mean, what
would you be doing? Well, you'd probably still work with them to make sure it was in the right key, perhaps, for the vocalist, or.
Oh yeah, I mean, pre-production. That's key.
Yeah. And you would notice if something was clashing harmonically, or all those things.
Of course, I mean, I'm not saying that I want to turn into a moron so that I can be a better producer. That's not at all the case. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you have guys who are amazing producers and also amazing musicians. Like one of my heroes, Daniel Lanois, is a tremendous musician.
I love his work too.
But his productions have a definite cachet, stamp.
He has a sound, yeah.
And then you take Don Was, who's also an amazing musician, and his productions seem to really kind of it's hard to tell if it was him or it just sounds great, but
it's an incredible melding that these folks do, though. There is some kind of special sauce that Don has versus Dan versus anybody that would be in that caliber of production expertise. Yeah. And like Don with Ricky Lee Jones or with Bonnie Raitt, you can just tell it's Don and you can tell it's Dan.
But not in the same way, because you can recognize, I can't recognize Don Was parts. It seems like he really lets people speak, whereas like Daniel always seems to have not just a sound, not just an aesthetic, but like musical parts that seem to belong to Daniel Lanois. So I would not, to me, they're just equally great, just not in the same way necessarily. But yes, they're both musicians.
Yes.
You have guys, other great musicians that are great producers. Blanking on his name now. Used to be married to Joni Mitchell. Produced.
Kevin Kline.
Yeah,
not Kevin. Larry Klein.
Larry Klein. Thank you, Larry. Amazing, amazing producer, amazing musician. Yes. But I've also hung out with people that are just like I said, they wouldn't be able to tell you if a chord. If you're playing a dominant chord on a major 7 chart, they don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes they leave it there. And that makes it super cool. Because the song still speaks.
Yeah. That's like the Beatles song Michelle, when they're playing a minor 7 and a dominant 7 sharp 9 at the same time. And it's like, what's going on there?
Well, I didn't even notice that. I'd have to go back and listen to this.
Right before my bell.
Yeah, but I mean, so now, and so this is what's interesting, actually. A few years back, I produced a record for a young woman who is local here. She moved to LA now, and I was determined to, even though she was folky with her guitar, and she wasn't particularly musically, technically educated, and she had a lot of talent, and. But I was determined to let other people do their thing a little more, except when there was really no clear direction for the song. And I end up mixing. There was a very small budget, not ridiculous, but small. And I end up, somebody recommends a local mixer, local engineer, and he had done a lot of blues stuff. And I remember liking what I heard. So I thought, well, that would be a nice aesthetic for this record. So let me call him up. Ducky Carlisle is his name. If I remember correctly. Ducky Carlisle. And he's a bit of a character too. He's a funny guy. And so I go and drop off the tracks, and it's like, yeah, let me start. So I was like, okay, I'll let you, but I might have to. So he calls me up. He's like, yeah, I got a couple tracks ready. Won't you come in and listen? Make sure we're in the right direction. So I go back to his house and sitting in the couch, and he starts playing the track. And it sounds really good. He's doing a great job. And I'm like, man, you're mixing this record like you like the music. I know, but I don't take it for granted. Engineers, they have to make a living. And, if you're going from a death metal to a folky record to a jazz thing, whatever, I mean, if you have the versatility to do this, I can't expect that you will like all the music equally, right? So I said that. I said, man, it sounds like you actually like the music. And he goes, I do. It actually reminds me of this record that I put on whenever I'm working on some things in the studio that I love listening to this record. It's a record called Plum by an artist named Jonathan Brooke. And I go, you're fucking with me, right? He goes,
no.
Oh, why? He says, but do you know who produced this record? No, I can't say that I paid attention to them. I said, well, I did. So I guess I can't, even when I'm trying to be hands off, I can't help but have a certain aesthetic. That's why I would love to work like the last couple of years. I did something that was very interesting. I have this friend named Andy Snitzer, who's a great sax player. We were in Paul Simon's band together, and he does these. He has a bit of a vibe with the smooth jazz people. He gets on those charts, etc. So he's a great player. He's one of the top studio guys in New York, and so he used to send me these records where I would just take a few Rhodes solos and stuff, and little by little, he started just asking me to do more. So I would send a bunch of stuff, and usually he would just take out 90% of it and just keep like a little there or like there,
I've been.
But the last two records, basically, he started just loving the stuff that I was sending him. I don't think this is because what I was sending was better. It's just that I think he was probably more open because he was tired of his own stuff. Like we all get tired of our own stuff after a while. And I love that relationship. I mean, some of the tunes, literally. So now I'm credited as co-producer, on the records, and some of those tunes I literally have taken what he sent me and just erased everything and redid, and half of the time, or maybe 80% of the time, when I do this, he just throws it out and just keeps my Rhodes part or my synth part or like. But then sometimes he loves it even better than his version. And I love that relationship because it's not, I don't have a vested interest in it. It's just what I do.
You're trying a bunch of things and whatever.
I'm telling, well, when you play this, it makes me think of this. And sometimes he likes his version better, but either way, I don't get offended because I'm not trying, And so we've done 2 records like that. The new one just came out. And it's also like, I'm not involved in this world at all. At all.
In his world, did you say?
Yeah, in the smooth jazz world.
Oh, the smooth jazz world.
I did one record for Verve a while back for Gabriela Anders, a singer from Argentina, but that was as smooth as I possibly could get. That was it. Everything else, has been like so. Yeah, I love when people have a vision. When I'm supposed to provide a vision for their record, I mean, at this point, I don't even do it anymore.
Yeah,
I'm tapped out. I don't have.
Well, in a sense,
was that?
In a sense, it's too much work, And
it's not original work.
Yeah.
It's not good work because I'm not challenged to make it different.
Yeah.
So it, I am basically, if I do it, then I'm basking in my own mediocrity, constantly because, repeating yourself. I mean, unless you're doing basic stuff, like
right.
One person with her or his voice and a guitar, that's timeless, But the second you try to and I've run into this so much with young artists, people who wanted me to do with their music what I did with records that they loved. And sometimes you have to have tough conversations.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you said it yourself, there was, by the way, my involvement with the Stories music, you could also say that it was a mixed blessing. I mean, clearly after we split up, Jonathan tried to do things a little poppier and less jazzy, et cetera, et cetera. And I hope it worked out for her. I'm not sure what it meant from a commercial perspective, but my involvement might have been a mixed blessing because, when she puts all these tensions on these chords, I'm going like, yeah, baby, let's go. As opposed to, what any other producer would say, which would be, can we take some of those out? Maybe can we try it every once in a while
I had done some pre-production stuff with Mark Hurd. He had produced a few songs for me back in 1987, and even a major 7. He said, do you mind if you just play a major chord there? I was like, what's going on? It's like if you take off too many of the spices, you're starting to chip away at what's making that artist, And so some of the things you're describing sound to me as everybody experimenting with flavors. And it's not to say this one was too spicy and this one wasn't spicy enough, or this one went too far, or this one didn't. I mean, when it starts going into commerce land, I could see where people will say this sold because of this or didn't sell because of that. And that's just a theory. But as far as the artist and the producer working on different colors and things, why not? And why not look back and talk about, or even look at all of it as if it was good, because there were aspects of it that were good. And then for you now, it's like, of course you want to grow. Of course you want to do something that challenges you. And of course it takes a while to figure out in terms of words, what is it that we're after now in our lives right now? What is going to be the most inspiring thing to be a part of? This has been cool.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you for asking. And I'm glad we did this. And if I need to clarify something or if I swore too much, just clean it up.
Well, thank you for saying yes, because I still think you're a fabulous musician, and I've really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I don't know about fabulous. I think fantastic is a better word, but
fantastic too. Excellent.
Yeah, right. No, I appreciate your support and the support of all the people who have trusted me with making music with them over the years. It's been very meaningful.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I said, and I meant it. I never took it for granted that there was any worth to what I was doing. The only proof that I had was when the phone was ringing, and still I wasn't sure if it was ringing because the other 10 guys before me were unavailable. So, you're not completely sure, but, you do
Well,
it.
you must have been vibrating well, because you attracted it, you got it, you lived it. You have the memories to prove it. You've got a lot of music in your catalog, and you look back at all these titles, and they still sound great.
Maybe I hope you're right. I hope you're right. But yeah, so it's been fantastic for asking me, and I guess I'll be seeing you on campus, huh?
Yep.
Okay.
Take good care. Thank you so much.
Take care, Alain. Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Alain Mallet. Check out his music. Check out the albums he's produced and the people he's worked with. Really great sounds, really cool playing, beautiful ideas, timeless music, fabulous sounds. Thank you so much, Alain. I have wanted to do this for a long time. That was really cool. For more of our conversation, check out the YouTube video on my channel. In the early days, rock and roll was supposed to be for young people. But when that happened, that was a brand new thing. You could do anything at any age. Look at Paul and Ringo and Mick Jagger. If you don't want to tour, stay in the studio, keep writing, keep recording. Find new ways, reinvent yourself, change your name. Whatever you got to do, keep on keeping on, because that's more fun, and we're all still here. Woohoo! We just have to renew ourselves, dream new dreams, and choose thoughts that serve us. Thank you, Eric Maisel. Thank you, Alain Mallet. Thank you, everybody. Go to your studio and make stuff. Feel good today.